Hey everybody, my name is Tim, and I recently made an ambience video where I tried to capture the feeling of just hanging out, maybe after a long week of work, in the backyard around a campfire with friends, just hanging out until the early morning hours. It's a feeling that I love and I wanted to capture it. But to do a full breakdown of the entire thing, like all the different aspects that would have gone into making this, would take forever. And it's kind of pointless because there's other tutorials that cover most of these aspects really, really well. But there are 6 things that I wanted to cover in this video that did influence how I worked on this project, and I feel like would be helpful for you to know. Those 6 things are the necessity of using references, the string light plugin that I used for this that did basically all of the lighting in the scene, the ability to use the city sample buildings that Epic provides in one of their demos, and then how to work with specifically the window materials to adjust the brightness of those, using physics to place things in a realistic way, such as the pile of wood that I have next to one of the chairs, changing the post-process volume settings regarding things like hit lighting for like the global illumination and reflections. That was one thing that I had to troubleshoot myself to make this scene actually work. And then the addition of subtle things that are not the feature in the video, but are very important to adding realism to the scene. Now, I want to preface this by saying I'm not claiming to be an expert in how Unreal Engine works or level design or anything like that. I feel like I'm far from it. But these are things that I've had to keep in my own mind that have helped me put together scenes like this in the last couple of years. And I feel like it might be helpful for somebody out there as well. So without any further ado, let's get going. All right, here we are in our scene. This is the same camera view that was in the video. As I scrub through my fairly simple level sequence, you can see the camera move. It kind of ping-pongs. Here you can see the few different keyframes I've got. It basically goes across behind this tree, comes to a rest, and then comes back. That, first of all, was to allow me to have a seamless loop. So it starts off with, I don't know, 150-ish, 130 frames of just static, and then it starts to move. It goes there and comes back and then ends the same way and gives me a couple hundred frames at the end. That was so that I could do a long crossfade at the beginning and end, which is actually the same starting and end point, and then have a smooth crossfade so it can be a seamless loop going back and forth for the hour-long video. But anyway, into the real stuff that we're going to cover today. Let me hop out of that view. This is the whole scene, okay? This is how we made this ambience video. And I want to start off by talking about the first thing on my list, which is references. I am basing this scene kind of loosely on my own yard. In my own yard, we have a privacy fence and we have string lights across it, and we have a big tree in our yard. And so part of this was just real life. I could just look out my window and see what I wanted it to look like. I also went on like Pinterest and just did Google searches for cozy, nostalgic feeling yards. And I got ideas for some different things for that. And so using references in general helps you to avoid things looking fake, because trying to create something that you want to look realistic just based off of memory, unless you're extremely familiar with it, it'll often be lacking certain details or certain elements that when you see it in real life, you're like, oh yeah, of course. Like for example, if you're driving down the road, you can see how many different types of grass there are on the side of the road, or like how many different kinds of rocks there are on a path. Whereas if you're in Unreal Engine, you might grab one type of grass and just put it on there and think that it should be good, when really like you should be adding a lot more different things. So using references was very important for me. My main reference was just outside, and then also using images that I found online. Moving on to, I would say is the main part of this whole scene, is the string light plugin, which is what generated all of these string lights that you see here. This is a really cool plugin that I found a while ago, and I don't remember if I got it for free or I bought it, but I was instantly like, I have to make something with this. What's cool is it has a ton of different features. Let me see if I can just make this thing go real quick. I'm gonna show you how to set this up. Let me grab, oops, that's right, I turned off there. So let me grab a fence here, and let's put it over here. So if I go into my content browser, and, oh, that's right, it's a plugin. So when you get it, it's actually a plugin, it's not an asset pack. So you go to plugins, string light plugin content, there we go. Blueprint, lights, I think. string light. There we go. So we put this in the scene, and it's spline based. Okay. So you might be able to see the rope anyway. There we go. There's the string. And you'll notice that this thing, by default, has physics going even when we're not simulating. This is just an editor. It's really cool. So what I did is basically take it, and I had my fence pieces where I wanted them. I took this thing, and because it's spline-based, you click into the spline, and you put it where you want. So I put one on each post, and you see that the rope automatically adjusts. And then I just kept going, and each time you create a new spline point, it's like it's anchoring it right there. So you could use this for cables, you could use it for, I mean, maybe it's not intended to be used like that. With no lights on it, it's basically just treated like a cable. But anyway, this is the basics of the string light plugin. And now if we go in here, let me hide, well, we can't hide those because then we lose all of our light. We'll hop in here, and if we scroll down in the details here to mesh customizations, you need to tell it basically what kind of bulb to put there. And so if we go in here, mesh, lights, you can pick whichever bulb you want. I think I use this one. Yeah, that's the one that's been changed. Go over here, tell it to select that, and now we got bulbs, but they're facing the wrong way. So it's pretty easy to change that. You go to transform customizations, and then you twirl this down. You got a bunch of different things you can do. So I don't remember which one this is. Okay, that's rotating it the wrong way. Let's go this way. That's up and down. There we go. So yeah, we're just going to go -90 on that. So now they're pointing straight down. What's cool is you got it like that. So they're all just kind of hanging there. There's probably too many lights there. And there are controls for basically everything. If you go up to lights and turn off auto density, you can control just how many lights there are by dragging this. So I think I had like 3 per section. And so just like that, we got 3 lights on there. And now we scroll down to the section that says light customizations, hit the plus, twirl that down. And for type, I picked point light because it's basically just a point light. Point light properties, general light properties. So you can see that the intensity is 50 lumens. It's got all the normal light properties, and actually the light is fairly bright, but we're not seeing anything here. That's because we have to go up here and tell it basically, so if we want a light to be there for every instance, we hit 1. You see how bright that was. So now we have a point light per actual light. And what you can see here is if we go to the light attached location, if I click through here, hit G, actually I need to click on this so we can adjust this. There we go. The light is coming from like too high. It's not coming from the bulb location. So what you can do is actually take this and adjust where the light's coming from. So you can adjust it so it looks a little more realistic. So let's just say 25 on this one. And that's where that's going to come from. So it's very handy to make sure that you can make it look correct. Let's get our spline controls back. Isn't that cool how it just swings like that? One cool thing about this being physics enabled and stuff, there's also wind properties that you can do. You can enable. So I click on simulate local wind, and these are now swaying. I'm going to turn off that so we can see this a little bit better. So you can adjust the forces, you know, the deviation, all this stuff. So I had all of my stuff turned pretty far down. This was at like 20 and this was -20. I think that's basically like how far one way it can go, how far the other way. So these will eventually kind of equalize and settle down. You can add dampening to this. So you can change almost anything about this. You can change the kind of bulb that's being used, the kind of light, you can change the light color, physics, wind simulation, all that kind of stuff. I'm not getting any kind of sponsorship from this plugin. I just thought it was really cool. And I feel like if anybody wants to create a string light effect, this is a great way to do it. I've also customized things like the cable length and the material that's on there. So by default, if this looks too like low poly and the material is bad or whatever, you can change all that. Okay, so don't worry about that. Another thing that I want to mention with regard to the string light plugin, and it's not a fault of the string light plugin, it's just the amount of lights that are in the scene. The way I was originally setting this up was by using, or I should say by not using Megalights. So if I go here and I turn Megalights off and I go back to my scene, you'll see this error pop up immediately. Virtual shadow maps, 1 pass projection max lights overflow. If you see shadow artifacts increase. Basically, I don't know exactly what this means, but I think it had to do with the fact that it couldn't load all the information for all of the shadows all at once because there's too many lights shining on the scene in too many different places. And I tried several different renders, and every time I was getting really bad shadow artifacts that were causing shadows to appear or disappear, or as the camera would move, they would like swipe across. And in a previous project, I had turned off Megalights because I was getting another issue. I don't even remember what that issue was, but I turned it off and I'm like, okay, I'm just not going to use Megalights. But Megalights is designed specifically for using lots of movable lights. And so I was like, maybe I'll just have to do it. So I turned Megalights back on, and it should make that error go away. Let's try going into camera view. There we go. So the error goes away using Megalights. So I ended up sticking with that, and it worked for me. So if you ever run into that, give Megalights a shot. But also, I believe that's only available in version 5.5 and up. All right, the next thing about this that we're going to break down, number 3, is using city sample buildings in this project. So if you didn't know, you can go to the Epic Launcher, Fab, whatever, and there's a whole city sample project. It's this massive thing made for the Matrix something, a demo. And it's to show off their PCG framework, I believe. But there's a ton of really good looking buildings in there. And what you can do is you can download just the buildings without having to download the entire project. And there's different levels where you can, let's see, let's go in here, content, city sample buildings. You can go in, I don't remember where, if you can grab them just by themselves. But what I did is I went into the maps, went into the hero level. And when the level eventually loads, it did take quite a while even for me to load this, you're presented with all these different buildings, which I think is probably all the buildings that make up the scene, the world. And let me get my speed picked up here because these are like full-size things. But what you can do is click through here, and I don't understand how this is set up, but I do know that you can copy and paste these from one level to another. And that's what I did. I won't do it right now, but you can pick which buildings you want. Like I grabbed a couple of these tall ones, a couple, I didn't grab that one, but I grabbed some of these like apartment looking ones, and I copied them all over into my level, and I just pasted them into my level, and then I copied and pasted them and moved them around to where I wanted. So all these buildings in the background are really just like a handful of the ones that I liked from the hero thing. And the city sample buildings are free to use in Unreal Engine projects. So I love using free sample things, and these worked out great for me. So here's another point that I hadn't put in my list, but only design your cinematic for what's going to be on screen or something that will directly affect something on screen. So for example, in this, if I go into my level sequence, I knew I wanted to keep this shot fairly simple. And so it's going to sweep from there to there and then back. So all I'm going to see is the stuff in front of the camera. This is about a 50mm lens, and it's going to go from there to there. And so I didn't have to worry about anything behind the camera or far to the sides or way across, like right across the fence. So when I placed these buildings, it was very specifically for where I was going to be seeing things. And I wanted it to feel like we're in a neighborhood that's near to the downtown area, but it's just outside. And so those buildings are going to be kind of in the far background. So when I set them out there, that's what they were for. They're basically like really nice, nicely made buildings that I'm using purely as background elements. And specifically, I wanted the bokeh from the lit windows to be in my shot. So if you look here, let me turn off our stuff. You see, you're getting the outlines of the buildings, but you're basically just getting the bokeh from the windows. So this leads to the next part of using the city sample buildings that I wanted to touch on, which is the materials, because when they come in, the windows were so bright compared to everything else I had in this scene. And I had to figure out a way to reduce the brightness of the windows. But here's the thing. If I go over here and you look, I don't know if you've looked at these buildings before, but they have this fancy like parallax material. There's nothing in there. It's a special material. And when I went into the material, it looked very complicated for me, somebody who was kind of still new to this. And so I'm like, how do I adjust this? I don't see any way to do this. So what I ended up doing was I would go into here and click on the building, click the edit button, and would open it up. I've already opened up all these windows just to show you the different levels you have to go through to adjust this. So this is the blueprint for the building, and it's made up of these different instanced static meshes. In this one, you can see the material that governs the windows, and the windows are like emissive inside the material. So you double click on that, it opens up this thing, and the parent for this one is here. The parent for this one is here. The parent for this one is here. Eventually you get to the actual master material, which is here, m_window. And this is a very complex shader for just windows. And all I needed to do was adjust the brightness. And so I went through and I traced where things go, and I realized it comes out here, it goes into the emissive color, comes out of this lerp. And what I did is I added a multiply node and a scalar parameter, and I just labeled it emissive brightness. And I set the default value to 0.001. That was after doing some testing to see what the brightness was that I wanted. Saved it, and then I was able to go through and adjust the brightnesses in all the materials that had windows. So all the stuff that would be in the background that was too bright, I could now adjust it and make it dimmer. So if I go into here, let me actually back up a bit so you can see more of this. And I'm going to adjust one of these, like if I go down here and I bring that window back up. Let's see, let's go to here. I adjust this emissive brightness value. Let's move this over a little bit so we can see this. If I set this to 1, you see the entryway windows down here? Set this back to 0.001. I think that's what it was. And if I go down here and you look at that, that's like a good brightness, I feel like. But if this is its default of 1, that's really stinking bright. And imagine all the windows being that bright. It doesn't look subtle. You don't get the nice warmth and the variation like that. They're all just bright. So that's what I ended up doing to allow me to have some control over these amazing city sample buildings to make it work in my project. So if you end up needing to do something like that, find the master material. You can just add a simple scalar parameter and multiply node and have that go into the emissive color. All right, we're back at our main location here next to the campfire. And I want to show you the next thing, point number 4, which is using physics to place things. Now, in previous versions of Unreal, there was a plugin that somebody had made called the physical layout tool. And it was extremely handy because you could use it in a few different ways to take meshes and just like click and drop them all over in piles and stuff. And it was amazing because you could make things land physically in piles naturally. But it appears to not have been updated for 5.5 and then 5.6 and so on. So I was like, how do I do this? I really like the look of things laying naturally, especially when I wanted to have a pile of firewood like this. And then I remembered that what you can do, let me actually select all this wood here, and let's move it over here. Let's alt click to make a copy of it all. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to raise it up. So what I did is I took all these different pieces of wood and I just kind of like put them in the scene, put them on top of each other in the air. And then I went up to here and I hit simulate. Now watch this. I've got all these things selected over here in my content browser thing, the outliner. And when I hit simulate, these all have gravity turned on, by the way. So these will all fall to the ground. Boop, now they're in a pile. And now what I can do is hit pause on my simulation, go over to the things that are still selected, right click, and hit keep simulation changes. I do that. It says saved state for 18 actors, and now I hit stop on the simulation, and it updates their transform properties to being right here. And what's cool is you can use this in a lot of different ways. You can use this if you wanted to have, like one way I'd used it is with coffee beans flying up in the air toward an object. And I waited until they hit the thing, and then I paused it. And then I right clicked and I did that, and I saved that as the place where they live. And so now those things don't have to be simulated anymore because they're just stuck in that spot, or something like this. You can have a bunch of stuff land in a pile and then save it right there, and it's good to go. So it's kind of a workaround that I had to figure out because that plugin doesn't seem to exist anymore. All right, point number 5 is using different Lumen global illumination settings for the ray lighting mode right here. Normally, I want to just have everything at the highest quality possible because my computer can handle it and I want to create high quality things. So I, by default, had this set to hit lighting for everything. And you can see there's all these weird sparkling, flickering firefly things through my scene. And I could not figure, I tried everything I could think of, and maybe there's a better solution to make this work. I couldn't figure it out. And the only way that it seems to get fixed is if I changed it from hit lighting to either surface cache or hit lighting for reflections. And I feel like hit lighting for reflections is probably higher quality than just surface cache. So I set it to that because there weren't any more fireflies in the scene. But if you run into that, you're running into this crazy firefly effect, and you have hit lighting turned on, maybe try changing it to one of these other two settings, and it may solve your problem. It solved it for me. All right, the last thing I want to mention in this video is the importance of adding subtle, natural details to your scene. In real life, when we look around and we interact with objects, or we go to and from work or whatever, we rarely notice the level of complexity that there is around us. Like I mentioned earlier, the grass on the side of the road, how there's probably 10 different things there, but all you think about is that there's grass, when there's actually so many different things. The texture on the wall, the number of little objects on the desk. Right now my desk is a mess, but you can't see it. Those kinds of things have to be considered to make the scene feel real. Even though the focal point in this is like the chairs and the fire and the fence and the lights and maybe kind of the plants on the side, there's all these other elements that if they weren't there, it would feel empty and it would feel fake, because you would realize that there should be more detail there. Just a couple examples, and again, I'm not claiming to be an expert. These are just things that I noticed building my own scenes over the last couple of years. As I was putting this together, I was like, oh, like even the wood here, that wasn't originally there. I felt like there needed to be something to feel like people were living here and were actually hanging out here for a while. The bottles and cans on the chairs, even things like this. This hose on the wall isn't part of the original house model. I put it there. There's a grill up here that you may or may not notice. I added that just in case something in the shadows could feel more realistic. There's a bench here. There's this playground, like it's an actual yard that kids might be in. There's a picnic table. There's bushes in the back that kind of reach up into the lights. It's very similar to things that I see in real life. And those are things that I feel like really make or break the realism for a scene that's supposed to feel real. It's actually one of my favorite things to do is get the scene blocked out and get the main elements in there and then go through and kind of do passes. You start off with the bigger details and then work to medium ones and then small. And by the end, you're like, wow, this looks so much better than it did before. One of my first projects I did in Unreal Engine was trying to make a creek, like a realistic looking creek flowing down, is supposed to be very serene. And I like took the Unreal Engine water body and made it go down, and I just put grass on the sides. I'm like, this looks so stupid. And it was so disheartening. And then I looked at references and I realized creeks actually have like rocks by them, and there's rocks in the bed, and there's plant life, and there's, you know, trees next to it and all sorts of stuff. And I started adding those things in, and I was like, oh, that was the difference. I didn't have enough detail. And every single project I run into, it's the details that make the difference. So as a quick recap, the 6 things we talked about are the importance of using references. Look at actual images of things that you want to recreate to see what details are there. Number 2, the string light plugin that I used for this project. I don't remember how much it is, but you can probably get it on whatever marketplace there is for Unreal Engine when you're watching this. Number 3, use the city sample buildings. Use the epic sample projects in your project. And then know that you can customize some things like the brightness of the elements, like the windows in the background here. You can customize those things. You may need to go into the materials, but you can do it. Number 4 is using physics to place objects around the scene. It adds so much realism, and it takes a lot less time than trying to like rotate and place things on your own using the transform tools. Number 5 is the difference between using hit lighting for everything, hit lighting for reflections versus surface cache, and trying to eliminate the flickers that you see in your scene. And then number 6 is, again, trying to add subtle natural details to the scene. Go big, go medium, go small, look at the scene, re-reference your references and see if it's all there. And if it is, great job. Render it out. So that's pretty much it for this tutorial. Now go make something.